You would never guess that the most important testimony of your career would come while wearing the orange jumpsuit of the county jail. But sometimes the best way to catch someone lying under oath is to make them think you have no power to stop them. For Agent Maya Williams, that moment came in the federal courtroom, when Officer Derek Morton took the witness stand and began lying about her with complete confidence. Morton was unaware that Maya was the FBI agent who had been investigating him for 8 months. Everything was about to come out in the open. Maya was 34 years old, very dark-skinned, and had been working as a special agent in the FBI's Public Corruption Unit for 9 years. She had spent those years investigating the very type of officers who were now testifying against her. The orange jumpsuit she wore was part of the most covert operation of her career. 3 months earlier, Maya had gone undercover as Maya Johnson, a person with no criminal record who had been set up to be arrested on deliberately fabricated charges. The goal was simple: to document how some officers fabricated charges, how prosecutors ignored evidence, and how the system protected both when confronted with evidence of abuse. She was arrested by Officer Derek Morton on fabricated charges such as resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. The arrest report claimed she had used violence during a routine traffic stop. Every word was a lie, and every word was documented by body cameras that the FBI didn't know about, dashboard cameras in Morton's patrol car that transmitted to FBI servers, and Maya's own hidden recording devices. The case proceeded as Maya's investigation had predicted. The prosecutor, who was under investigation, had pressed charges despite video evidence contradicting the arrest report. The public defender assigned to Maya Johnson was actually an FBI attorney working undercover. Morton sat in the witness chair, wearing his official uniform, every button gleaming. He had 22 similar arrests on his record. All had unfolded in the same way, all had targeted people resembling Maya, and all had ended in plea bargains that prevented a trial. Morton had somehow managed to get off scot-free each time, but this time was different. The interrogation was being conducted by U.S. Deputy Prosecutor Rachel Chen. Maya had previously worked with her on 4 corruption cases. "Officer Morton, can you describe the events of September 15th? Rachel asked. Morton began his statement with his usual ease. At around 3:45 p.m., I conducted a routine traffic stop on the defendant. The rear light of the vehicle was broken. When I approached to see his license and registration, the defendant immediately became hostile and aggressive," he replied. He was clearly continuing to lie. Maya sat at the defense table in her orange jumpsuit. There was nothing in her behavior to suggest anything other than what she appeared to be. "What happened next?" Rachel asked. "I asked him to get out of the car for safety reasons. He refused. When I repeated my instruction, he started shouting profanities and accusations of harassment. I tried to de-escalate the situation, but he became physically aggressive," he said. He had now taken the incident to another level. The lies flowed smoothly. "Can you describe the physical aggression?" Rachel asked. "He shoved me hard in the chest, then tried to run away. For everyone's safety, I followed and caught him. He continued to resist violently. I had no choice but to arrest him for assaulting and resisting an officer," he continued with his lies. Maya's statement remained unchanged, but her tension was palpable. Rachel approached the witness stand with a tablet. "Officer Morton, you were wearing a body camera during this incident, correct?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Department policy," he said. "And that camera was recording?" she asked again. "It should have been." "Yes," said Morton. "It should have been," Rachel repeated. Morton shifted slightly. "The camera malfunctioned during the incident. A technical glitch. It happens sometimes with this equipment," he said. Of course, this was another huge lie, like the others. "I see. What about the camera on the front panel of the patrol car?" Rachel asked. "That one malfunctioned too, on the same day. We had some bad luck with the equipment," he said. Everyone in the room murmured that this couldn't be true. Rachel slowly shook her head. "Both cameras malfunctioned during the same incident," she said. Rachel clearly suspected something. She knew Morton was lying. "Unfortunately, yes," said Morton. "So there is no video recording to prove what you're saying," said Rachel. "Correct. But my report documents everything accurately, and my sworn testimony should suffice," Morton said. He was acting cocky. He was behaving as if he were certain he wouldn't be punished. Maya watched Morton and noted every micro-expression, every clue that showed someone who had successfully lied many times before and was expected to do so again. Rachel turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I wish to present evidence that contradicts Officer Morton's statement," she said. The judge, a federal appointee named Harrison, who was briefed on the operation but whose reactions to the recordings had to be genuine, nodded. "Proceed." Rachel projected a video onto a large screen visible to the entire courtroom. "This is Officer Morton's body camera footage from September 15th. Despite Officer Morton's statement that it was malfunctioning, the footage was automatically uploaded to the department's server and backed up in the FBI's evidence system," she said. Morton's confident demeanor faltered for a moment. He hadn't expected his lie to be exposed. The video played. It showed Morton approaching Maya's vehicle. The conversation was calm and professional. Maya immediately handed over her license and registration. There was no hostility, no aggression, no pushing. When Morton ordered her to get out of the vehicle, Maya complied completely. When Morton roughly grabbed her by the arm and pushed her toward the vehicle, Maya remained calm and asked why she was being arrested. Up to this point, everything seemed perfectly normal, except for one difference. It was different from the lie Morton had told. The video showed that Morton had made up his accusations on the spot. His voice clearly implied that Maya had attacked him, but the footage showed Maya's hands completely still and out of sight. Rachel paused the video. "Officer Morton, you just testified under oath that the defendant was hostile, aggressive, and used physical violence. The video shows none of that. Can you explain this contradiction?" she asked. Morton's face shifted from a confident expression to a pale one. The footage must have been edited. "That's not what happened," he insisted, trying to stand by his lie. "The footage comes directly from your body camera's secure server. It has a verified timestamp and digital signature confirming it hasn't been altered. Are you implying that someone hacked the police servers to fabricate evidence?" she pressed with another challenging question. With each question, Morton crumbled a little more. He had little left to cling to. "I'm saying that's not how I remember it," he said. Rachel said quietly, "you are making a false statement." The judge leaned forward. "Officer Morton, I'm going to give you one last chance to revise your statement. Did the events unfold as shown in this video, or as you described in your statement?" he asked one last time. Morton glanced around the courtroom. His lawyer, who was also under investigation, whispered urgently to him. Morton's hands gripped the witness stand. "I need to talk to my lawyer," he finally said. "That's not how things work," Judge Harrison said. "You took an oath. You gave testimony. The video evidence directly contradicts that testimony. I am asking you directly, did you lie under oath in this courtroom?" he asked. Expression of panic, calculation, defiance appeared on Morton's face. Then Maya stood up. All eyes in the courtroom turned to her. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I have something to say," she said. The public defender and the FBI attorney did not object. The judge nodded. Maya's voice was clear and calm. "My name is not Maya Johnson. I am Special Agent Maya Williams from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Public Corruption Unit. For 8 months I have been working undercover in this judicial district investigating systematic civil rights violations and perjury. Officer Morton's testimony today is the 23rd documented instance of perjury in court proceedings. Everything that just happened was recorded by federal investigators and witnessed by witnesses," she said. The veil of secrecy had been lifted. Morton was frozen. There was no turning back now. Morton's lawyer suddenly stood up. The judge banged his gavel to restore order. Maya continued calmly. "Officer Morton, you are under arrest for making false statements, falsifying police reports, conspiring to violate rights under the guise of the law, and violating civil rights. You have the right to remain silent," she said. 2 seated FBI agents stepped forward in handcuffs. When the reality of his situation sank in, Morton froze at the witness stand. The confident demeanor he had displayed upon entering the courtroom was completely gone, replaced by visible panic. "Your Honor," said Rachel Chen, "the United States wishes to present additional evidence related to this investigation." Judge Harrison, who had been briefed on the operation but was clearly shocked by the execution, nodded. "Proceed," he said. Rachel brought a document to the screen. Over the past 8 months, Special Agent Williams' investigation has documented a pattern of abuse involving not only Officer Morton, but also a network of officers and prosecutors who systematically violated civil rights and made false statements to secure convictions, she said. This was a major development. A graph appeared on the screen. 22 arrests made by Morton over 3 years. All followed the same pattern. All targeted black defendants. All resulted in plea bargains. Agent Williams was on a special undercover assignment, specifically because Internal Affairs had dismissed previous complaints against Officer Morton. The investigation revealed why. The Internal Affairs investigator assigned to review Morton's cases was his former partner, and had been covering for him for years. Morton's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, my client is invoking his right against self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment and will not answer any further questions." "Noted," said Judge Harrison. "However, Officer Morton, you should know that invoking this right after making a false statement does not negate the false statement. You remain in custody." These cuffs were identical to those he had applied to Maya and 22 others on fabricated charges. Maya watched expressionlessly. The investigation had been conducted for this moment, but this moment offered no satisfaction. There was only the cold acceptance that the delay of justice meant the denial of justice for the 22 people before her. These individuals had chosen to bargain for a plea deal rather than fight the charges they knew were false. Rachel continued her presentation. The investigation revealed that Assistant District Attorney James Mercer, who had repeatedly prosecuted cases he knew were based on false arrests, was also involved in this incident. Agent Williams's case was assigned to Mr. Mercer, who continued the prosecution despite video evidence that undermined the charges. A man sitting in the prosecution section of the courtroom froze. He was in his mid-40s, dressed in an expensive suit, and his face paled when he realized he was under investigation. "Mr. Mercer," Judge Harrison said, "please stand." Mercer slowly rose, his hands clenched tightly on the table in front of him. "FBI agents are here to arrest you too," said the judge, "for civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and prosecutorial misconduct." More FBI agents entered the courtroom. Mercer's arrest was quieter than Morton's. He did not resist or protest. He simply kept his head bowed as the handcuffs were applied, and his legal career ended in the same courtroom where he had built it on false convictions. Rachel turned to Maya. "Agent Williams, would you like to address the court?" Maya stepped forward, and the courtroom saw her not as an orange-clad defendant for the first time, but as a federal agent who had lived as someone else for 8 months to document systematic injustice. 3 months ago, Maya began, her voice steady and clear, "I allowed myself to be arrested on completely fabricated charges. I was processed, booked, and held in the county jail for 72 hours until my so-called family paid bail. I went through every stage that 22 people before me had gone through. The difference was that I knew the charges were baseless and that I had the FBI behind me. They didn't have that option. They had to choose between fighting a system designed to break them and making a plea deal that would give them a criminal record for something they didn't do." Maya turned to Morton, who stood handcuffed among the FBI agents. "Officer Morton testified with great confidence today because he's done it many times before. He knows how the system works when the defendant can't fight back. But he was careless. He stopped checking his equipment. He stopped verifying that his body camera was actually malfunctioning. Even if it wasn't, he figured no one would believe a black woman over a white police officer." The courtroom was completely silent. "This assumption," Maya continued, "is why this investigation is necessary. Not just to catch a corrupt officer, but to document how the entire system can protect corruption when the victims are people society doesn't believe by default." She turned to the judge. "We have gathered further evidence on 7 officers and 3 prosecutors who exhibited similar behavior. All these cases will be referred to federal prosecutors. We also recommend that all convictions based on these officers' testimony be reviewed for possible acquittal." Judge Harrison slowly shook his head. "The court will order precisely that review. Clerk, please have the clerk's office compile a list of all cases from the last 5 years that included Officer Morton's testimony. We will set a hearing date to review each one." Rachel added, "Your Honor, the FBI has identified 22 individuals who entered plea bargains in cases involving Officer Morton. We have begun contacting them regarding the possibility of overturning their convictions." "Good," said the judge. "Now as for Agent Williams, all charges against him have of course been definitively dismissed. Agent Williams, we thank you for your service. This investigation required significant personal risk and professional dedication. The court recognizes that." Maya nodded once. "Thank you, Your Honor." As Morton and Mercer were led out of the courtroom, the spectator gallery, filled with people who thought they were watching a routine preliminary hearing, erupted in conversation. Reporters who were there for other cases had already grabbed their phones. The news was breaking in real time. Maya exited the courtroom through a side entrance, accompanied by the FBI team. She was taken to a secure location, where she removed her orange jumpsuit and put on her own clothes. After living as someone else for 3 months, this simple act held profound meaning for her. Her supervisor, Deputy Director Kenneth Morrison, was waiting for her. "You gave a tremendous performance in there," he said. "It wasn't a performance," Maya replied. "I was testifying." "You're right. How are you?" Maya sat down and felt the weight of the last 8 months settle on her shoulders. "Ask me in a week." The investigation that began with Maya's undercover operation quickly expanded. With the arrests of Morton and Mercer, other officers and prosecutors under surveillance decided to cooperate rather than face trial. The corruption network that had protected itself for years began to collapse as each participant tried to minimize their own risk. Within 2 weeks, 7 more police officers were arrested. 3 more prosecutors were charged. The internal affairs inspector who dismissed the complaints against Morton was fired and referred for criminal prosecution. The entire command structure of the police force was reviewed. However, the most important outcome was the systematic review of convictions. Maya personally contacted 22 people in similar situations. 17 of them had entered plea bargains rather than fighting charges they knew were false. The convictions of 17 people were overturned within 3 months. 5 more had gone to trial and been convicted. These cases took longer, but the 5 were eventually exonerated based on evidence that Morton and Mercer had concealed. One of those exonerated was a man named Marcus Thompson, who had served 18 months of a 3-year prison sentence for assaulting a police officer. As in Maya's case, the assault had never actually occurred. He was released immediately upon his conviction being overturned. Maya met him at a cafe in downtown Atlanta 2 weeks after his release. He was 38 years old, had lost his job and his apartment due to his conviction, and was struggling to rebuild his life. "I kept telling them it didn't happen that way," Marcus said, his voice still carrying the weariness of someone who had fought and lost. "I kept saying the police were lying, but my public defender told me to accept the deal. He said no jury would believe the police over me." "He was probably right," Maya said quietly. "Not because you weren't telling the truth, but because the system isn't designed to believe you." "But they believed you. They believed the evidence. The video that Morton said didn't exist. The documents showing a pattern. That's what this investigation was for, to create evidence that couldn't be ignored or dismissed." Marcus shook his head slowly. "So what happens now?" "I have a criminal record. Even though it's expunged, it still shows up in a background check. I can't get my job back. I can't get my house back. You caught the cop, but my life is still ruined." These words, as Maya had predicted, fit perfectly into the gap between justice served and justice denied. Morton was going to prison. Merker had lost his law license. The convictions had been overturned. But the time Marcus had lost, the job he had lost, the months he had spent in county jail awaiting trial, none of that could be undone. "You're right," Maya said, "and I can't fix that. The only thing I can do is connect you with a human rights lawyer who handles wrongful conviction cases. You have grounds to file a major lawsuit against the department and the county. It won't give you back the time you lost, but it could provide the resources you need to start over." She handed him a business card. "Her name is Patricia Moore. She's looking into other cases related to this investigation. Tell her I sent you." Marcus took the card and studied it for a moment. "You really spent 3 months in jail for this?" "In the county jail, yes, as part of the operation." "Why? Why take that risk?" Maya considered the question. "Because I could. Because I had the FBI behind me, and you didn't. Because when you have institutional power, the system works differently than when you don't. I wanted to document what happens to people who don't have that power, and the only way to do that realistically was to experience it." Marcus paused, searching for words. "That's the bravest or craziest thing I've ever heard." "Probably both," Maya admitted. 6 months after Morton's arrest, the case went to trial. Morton's lawyer tried every possible defense, that the videos were edited, that Maya set him up, that federal officials overstepped their authority and violated his rights. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. The jury found him guilty on all charges in less than 4 hours. Morton was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Mercer entered a plea bargain instead of going to trial. He received an 8-year prison sentence and was permanently barred from the profession. The division underwent a major restructuring, new oversight protocols, independent review of all use of force incidents, a civilian review board with genuine investigative authority. The changes weren't perfect or complete, but they were measurable improvements over what had come before. Maya returned to her regular duties at the Public Corruption Unit. The undercover operation was complete, but the investigation's impact lingered. Other jurisdictions reached out, requesting similar investigations. The method Maya developed, using an undercover federal agent as a defendant to document systematic violations, became a model for other corruption cases. A year after Morton's conviction, Maya was invited to speak about the investigation at the FBI Academy. She stood in a room full of new agents and explained the operation, the risks, the results, and the limitations. "We got convictions," she told them. "We overturned wrongful convictions. We made systemic changes. However, we couldn't compensate for the damage done to people who were victims before this system was recognized. That damage is permanent. What we did was prevent it from continuing and hold people accountable for what they did. That's important. But it's not the same as fully compensating people." An agent sitting in the front row raised his hand. "Would you do it again, now that you know the limits of what we achieved?" Maya did not hesitate. "Yes. Because even if you cannot compensate for past harm, there is value in stopping ongoing harm. Because accountability matters, even if it comes late. Because the system only changes when someone forces it to change." She looked at the faces of the agents in the room who would make similar choices, take similar risks, document similar injustices. "Remember," she added, "exposing corruption is not the same as fixing it. It's a necessary step, but it's not the final step. The final step is to build systems that don't allow corruption to develop in the first place. We're not there yet, but every case like this brings us closer." The applause that followed was respectful rather than enthusiastic. These were people who understood the complexity of what he was saying, that victories in the work for justice are often incomplete, that accountability is crucial but insufficient, that the work continues no matter how many individual battles are won. Maya returned to Atlanta and her job. The Morton case was closed. New cases were opened. The Public Integrity Unit continued its work because corruption continued. But somewhere in Atlanta, Marcus Thompson was rebuilding his life with the resources he gained from a settlement agreement that, flawed as it was, acknowledged the injustice he had suffered. Somewhere, 17 more people were living without wrongful convictions on their records. Somewhere, a police department had a new oversight mechanism that made it harder for the next Morton to operate unchecked. This was not perfect justice, but it was justice nonetheless. Hard-won, carefully documented, and achieved by an agent who dared to wear an orange jumpsuit in court and watch a corrupt official lie confidently about him, knowing the truth was being recorded and that reckoning would come. Sometimes justice requires patience. Sometimes it requires months of working undercover. Sometimes it requires sitting silently while someone swears falsely against you. And sometimes, as Maya thought, it requires remembering that catching the corrupt is necessary but not sufficient. The sufficient part was what came after: systemic changes, clearances, rebuilding. This work was slower, less dramatic, and infinitely more important. She turned to the next case file and began reading. The work continued,